Hello everybody, welcome back to the workbench. Today we're going to be working on this Arrma Senton here, replacing the front and rear bearing carriers as well as the bearings that go in them. So, what we're actually replacing today is these, Arrma 330469, those are the front bearing carriers. The part that those sit in is number 330442 in case you need to replace those. Then the rear bearing carriers are 330467. I'll be showing you how to get to all the bearing carriers as well as replace the bearings that go in them. But today I'm only actually replacing the front steering bearing carriers. Now, as far as the bearings that go in them, I picked up the Pro-tek 6x12x4 rubber sealed speed bearings. This is would be considered an upgrade. There they are for you. If you wanted to go with stock Arrma bearings, that part number is 610041. Alright, without any further ado, let's get to it. Starting off with the front bearing carriers here, what you're going to need is a 7mm socket, and some nice tools will help make this go nice and smoothly. We're going to start by taking off the wheel here. Make sure you don't lose your wheel nuts. Now, once we have the wheel off, you want either a flathead screwdriver or some kind of pry tool to pry the hex off. Gently here. And then once you have the hex off, there's going to be a pin that goes through the stub axle there. Make sure you don't lose that pin, you'll need it when you're putting everything back together. So now that we have that apart, we are going to need a hex. So in order to remove the front bearing carrier, you're going to need a 2.5mm hex driver as well as a 2mm. There are two 2.5mm screws, one top and one bottom, and then the 2mm is attached to the steering here. And as far as taking them out, it's as simple as unthreading them, given that you have the right size tool. So with that one out of the way, I'm going to remove the other two, and then I'll come back to you when we're ready to actually take the block out. So once you have those three screws removed, you can basically tilt the top of the bearing carrier out, and then just slide the whole assembly away. The outer half of the stub axle might come with it. All you got to do is just pull it out, and you can see you got access to the inner and outer bearings. In my case, the outer bearings have gone bad, so we'll be replacing those. And as you can see, this bearing carrier is definitely shot. It's been shaved down about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch there. So we'll definitely need to replace those. And then a note about when you take these guys out, this little bushing here might fall out. It goes up from the bottom into the hole there, so when you're reinstalling, make sure you get that piece back in there, or your steering might not work quite right. And the disassembly is going to be the exact same on the other side, just mirrored. Those three screws, tilt the block out, and away you go. So next up, we'll get the new bearing carrier, install the bearings in it, and then we'll show you how these go back in. Alright, so here we are with the new and the old bearing carriers right next to each other. And you can compare it in here and see just how blown out this one is. So, first thing to note is if you're going to be reusing any of the bearings from the other one, you'll want to gently pry them out of the old one. And as you can see, actually probably can't quite see, but there is quite a lot of play in that bearing, so it's good we're replacing those today. The inner bearing, though, appears to be in decent shape. And just take care when you're removing these to not damage the bearing. There we are. And then with the bearings and the new bearing carrier, it's as simple as pressing in the new bearings, which can sometimes require a bit of force. You can see that one went in pretty smoothly. And once you have those bearings pressed in, we're going to be ready to install these back onto the truck. Alright, so with the new bearing carriers put together, with both the outer and inner bearings assembled there, installation is pretty much just the reverse of disassembly. So first things first, we're going to slide the end of the stub axle into the housing there. Of course, like I said, don't forget that bushing there. Go ahead and push that guy up in before we slide the block in there. We'll kind of drop the bottom in. actually, before anything else, slide the axle back together. Sort of drop the bottom in. And getting that bushing to line up might sometimes require a tool. Kind of push the bearing, or sorry, the bushing into place while you slide the bearing carrier back in. And I'm struggling here, as you can see. But I'll come back to you once it's all put back together. Awesome. So with the new bearing carrier installed, those 3 screws put back in, not forgetting to reinstall that upper bushing, which is likely to fall out, we are ready to reinstall our wheel hex and then reinstall the wheel and tire itself. So reinstalling the wheel hex is pretty easy. You just got to slide that pin in there, pop the wheel hex on top of it, and if it doesn't seat all the way, that's okay, because you can just throw the wheel on over it, and then as you thread the nut down, it'll bring it home. Just like that. So that's the front done. Now let's move on to the rear. Alright, so moving on to the rear here, the first step is the same. Got to take off this wheel here. Pretty simple, just got that 7mm nylon lock nut, and then the wheel will slide off. And then the next step, again, like the front, is to pry off the hex. Once you have that off, of course, same as the front once again, got the pin, don't lose it. And then the next step is where we start to deviate from the way that the front is put together. You'll see here on the bottom we have a screw, basically locks a pin into place there, and then on the top is just a screw that goes all the way through the camber length there. That one's pretty simple, but to remove the bottom pin, we first have to remove this screw here, which helps if you have a tool laying around to do that. Here we go. It's a very short screw. There it is. As you can see, it is a very small screw. And then in order to push the pin out, I find that a 0.05mm hex driver is enough to get it started. And you can grab onto it, most likely with a set of pliers, in order to pull that out. So I'll come back to you once I've got this hub pulled out to show you how to get the bearings replaced. Right, so there's the rear bearing carrier taken out, and just like the front, gently pry out the bearings a little bit at a time in order to remove them. I find that going in a circular pattern and prying around helps remove those stubborn bearings. There we go. Then it's as simple as pressing the new one in. And if you're going for the rears, the process is much the same. Although I got lucky and the bearing came out with the axle, which is nice, given that I'm not replacing it. But if I was, that would have made it super simple. But then we just slide that stub axle back in, and we're ready to put it all back into the truck, just like that. Alright, so just like the front, installation is the reverse of disassembly. So we'll start by installing the stub axles together there. And then this would be a good time to thread in the top screw, although I am going to start by installing the bottom pin. The only difficult part of this is making sure that they're aligned, but once they are, the pin will slide right in for you. And then now all that's left is screw in the bottom, screw in the top, and it's ready to go. Alright, so with those 2 screws reinstalled, we are ready to reinstall the wheel hex and the wheel and tire. Just like the front, slide the pin in. And press the wheel hex on. And once again, it's alright if you don't get that hex seated all the way. because once you thread the wheel on there, it's going to pull it tight for you. There we are. Alright, so there you have it, a decently simple fix, and in my case a nice little upgrade with those bearings. Hopefully should keep this thing running good for a nice long while. Now, can't recommend enough that you buy yourself a decent RC toolkit like this one I've got here from Horizon Hobby. Makes the job go a lot smoother considering you have all the tools that you could need at your disposal in the palm of your hand essentially. So, thanks for watching. If you haven't already, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, whatever you're gonna do. And until next time, have a good one.